Okay, so this is the test review for Module 8 and 9. This is the one that you guys received to study for the test. Here we go. Let's start right away with number 1. 5 times 2x minus 1 quantity squared equals 5. You're supposed to solve this, and it's a multiple choice question. Remember what I said. Make sure you identify the difference between multiple choice and multiple response, right? Multiple choice means choose one. Multiple response, like number 2 here, means choose as many as you think are correct. Okay, so let's start with the first one, multiple choice. The first thing I'm going to do in this one, I'm going to rewrite it over here so you guys can see better. 2x minus 1 squared equals 5. First thing I'm going to do is divide both sides by 5 to get rid of it. The 5 cancels, the 5 cancels, so what I'm left with is the quantity 2x minus 1 squared equals 1. Then what you do after that is to kill the square by taking the square root of both sides. And so the square cancels the square root, leaving you with 2x minus 1 equals plus or minus, the square root of 1 is just 1. And now you just solve it for both solutions. You're going to add 1 and make sure you do it for both the positive 1 and the negative 1. So it's going to be 2x equals 1 plus 1, which is 2, and also negative 1 plus 1, which is 0. And then the final step is to divide by 2. Divide this one by 2, divide this one by 2, so you're done. X equals 1, and also x equals 0, which means that the correct solution is letter D. Okay, now number 2 says, which of the following expressions is equivalent to 25x squared minus 9? Equivalent means the same, okay, meaning it is the exact same equation. So what you need to do is compare all of them to see which one gives you 25 squared minus 9 at the end. Now it's a multiple response question, which means choose as many as you think are correct. So I'm going to go one by one to see which one gives me 25x minus 9. Now A, if I distribute here using FOIL, I'm going to get 25x squared minus 25x, distribute the 9, plus 9x minus 9. So I do get 25x squared and I do get negative 9 right there, 25x squared and negative 9, but the two inner parts, negative 25x and plus 9x, do not cancel out, okay, which means that that one is not correct. So forget about that one. Let's go to the next one, and the next one says 5x minus 3 and 5x plus 3. I believe you can probably see that that is a correct one, because that is a difference of two perfect squares right there. So if you distribute this one, 5x gives you 25x squared plus 15x. Then distribute the negative 3 as well, and you get minus 15x minus 9. And in this one you can see that the positive 15x and the negative 15x cancel out, leaving you with 25x squared minus 9, which means that this one is one of the solutions. Now it's multiple response though, make sure you notice that, so choose more than one probably. Doesn't mean that there's actually more than one, there could be just one, but we need to check the other ones just to be sure. Okay, so part C, 5x plus 3 squared, that means 5x plus 3 times 5x plus 3 minus 30x plus 18. 5x plus 3 times 5x plus 3 gives me 25x squared. I'm going to FOIL right here. Right there, multiplied, plus 15x, because it's 3 times 5x, plus 9. But then on top of that, there's a negative 30x over there and a plus 18. I combine everything that I can here, so I get 25x squared. The 15x and the 15x make 30x, but the negative 30x means that it cancels out. But the positive 9 and the positive 18 make positive 27. So that's not what I want. Remember, up here we want minus 9, so not C. Okay, so I'm going to try D now. Erasing the word for C. So let's try D. D is the same idea. 5x minus 3 times 5x minus 3 plus 30x minus 18. 5x times 5x is 25x squared. 5x times negative 3, right here, this is what I'm doing right now. I did that one, and I'm doing the next one. Minus 15x. Negative 3 times 5x, this one right here, is minus 15x again. And negative 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Positive 9. Positive 9. There you go. And then plus 30x minus 18 at the end. Combine all the like terms. I have 25x squared, which doesn't combine with anything. Negative 15 and negative 15x make negative 30x, but combine it with the positive 30x, they cancel. And then positive 9 and negative 18 combine to make negative 9. And there it is. That's 25x squared minus 9, which means that D is also a solution. So there's two solutions on that one, B and D. Make sure you check every single one for multiple response problems. Okay, number 3 says factor negative 36x cubed minus 27x squared minus 54. I'm going to zoom in a little more so you guys can see. Now, like I said in class, I believe there's supposed to be an x here. Put an x right there with the 54. That way we can factor, okay? Even after I put that x though, this one ended up being not factorable when it comes to x factoring or breaking that up into two binomials. So the only thing I can see here is that they all have a negative 9x in common. Negative 9x. Negative 9x. So when you do that, you factor out negative 9x, and what's left inside is going to be 36 divided by 9, which is 4, x squared, plus, because you're dividing by negative, so it's positive, 3x, plus 6. And then you can try to factor that, right? 4 times 6 is 24, so you're looking for two numbers that multiply to make 24 and add up to make 3. And you might try 1 times 24, and you might try 2 times 12, and you might try 3 times 8, and you might try 4 times 6, but nothing works, right? Since none of those work, you're done at this point. That's finished. Alright, now number 4 says factor. Make sure you understand the difference between factor and solve. Solve means you got to come up with x equals what? X equals something, right? Factor means just break it up. Break it down into its factors, okay? So I'm going to factor these by multiplying a times c. 1 times 90 is 90. And find the factors of 90 that when I combine them, they make negative 19. Now I see that it's negative 19, which gives me a clue. Both of these numbers that I multiply must be negative, because that's the only way that I'm going to get a negative when I combine them, but a positive when I multiply them. So I try everything. 1 times 90, which makes no sense, right? We want negative 19. 2 times 45, also not correct. You keep trying, and eventually you will see that in negative 10 and negative 9 multiply to make positive 90 and add up to make negative 19. So once you have those two, we're going to factor by grouping here. Negative 10 and negative 9 are my two numbers, right? Negative 10, I put them right here so I remember, and negative 9. So what I write is ax squared, remember this, x squared, in this case it's just x squared, minus 10x, because that's my m, minus 9x, because that's my n, plus 90. Factor by grouping. I'm going to group these two together, and I'm going to group these two together over here. So the first two have an x in common, which leaves you with x minus 10. The second group has a negative 9 in common, which leaves you with x minus 10, which means that your factor is x minus 10 times x minus 9. And that is the result. Okay, let's look at number 5 now. It says, what is the solution to 5x squared minus 50 equals 15x? Okay, so once again it says, what is the solution? That it doesn't say factor. That means you actually have to solve it all the way. Your answer should be something like x equals something, right? So let's look at this. 5x squared minus 50 equals 15x. First of all, it's not in any of the form that we like. It's not in any of the forms. It's not in standard form, which we like for quadratic formula or for factoring. It's not even ready for completing the square, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is move the 15x to the left side and put it in standard form, and then I'm going to make a decision about what to use, okay? So I'm going to move 15x this way, When I do that, I get 5x squared minus 15x minus 50 equals 0. That's what I have. And then when I do that, when I have that, I can actually make a decision. First, I see that they all have 5 in common, right? So I can actually divide everything by 5 to make my equation even simpler, okay? When I do that, this is what I have. X squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Do I need that 5? I don't need it because I'm dividing by 5 on the left side. I'm also dividing by 5 on the right side. And 0 divided by 5 is just 0. So that 5 is basically gone. You don't need it. Now at this point you make a decision. Do I want to complete the square? Do I want to factor? Do I want to use the quadratic formula? My first choice is always factoring. I like factoring. It's fast. It's easy for me. But you might find completing the square easier, or you might find the quadratic formula easier, okay? Use whichever method you feel most comfortable with. I'm going to try to factor. If it doesn't work, then I go to something else, okay? So 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. That's what I get, negative 10. And I look for factors of negative 10 that add up to negative 3, and I think negative 10 times positive 1, that doesn't work. Negative 2 times positive 5, that doesn't work, but if I change the signs, negative 5 times positive 2, that works. See, negative 5 times positive 2 is negative 10, and you combine them to make negative 3. So those are my two factors. So here's what I'm going to write. Ax squared, which is just x squared, minus 5x, once again, look, I'm looking at these right here, minus 5x plus 2x minus 10 equals 0. I factor by grouping, so I'm going to group these together and I'm going to group these together. X squared minus 5x have an x in common, so it's x minus 5. 2x and negative 10 have a 2 in common, so I'm going to factor out 2 and leave x minus 5. And there you go. That looks much easier to solve now. I can factor that. I'm going to continue here. I can factor that and say it's x plus 2 for my first factor, and x minus 5 is my second factor. Set that equal to 0. When I set it equal to 0, I can now split them up and solve them. X plus 2 equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. Solve the left side and I get x equals negative 2. Solve the right factor and I get x equals 5. There's your two solutions. Okay, x equals negative 2 and 5. Okay, number 6 says solve 2x squared plus 11x equals negative 5 using the quadratic formula. So it's telling me to use the quadratic formula. I'm going to go ahead and use it. You don't have to. It's a multiple choice question. So if you want to use completing the square, go for it. If you want to use factoring, go for it. Okay, I'm going to use the quadratic formula because it's telling me to do that. So I'm going to use that. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is put it in standard form. This is not ready for quadratic formula. I need to move the 5 over to the left side. Okay, don't make the rookie mistake here. You don't combine the 11x and the 5. So it's 2x squared plus 11x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, now we're going to plug those into the quadratic formula. In this case, a equals 2, b equals 11, c equals 5. I'm going to use the discriminant first, b squared minus 4ac. I always try to get rid of that first. B squared in this case is 11 squared, which is 121, minus 4 times a, which is 2, and c, which is 5. So it's 121 minus 4 times 2 is 8 times 5 is 40, minus 40. Make sure you check the signs on this part, okay? It's negative 4 times positive 2 times positive 5 will give you negative, because it's negative times positive times positive. It's going to give you negative 40. Alright, so that 121 minus 40 gives me 81. That's my discriminant. Now I can go ahead and use the entire quadratic formula. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, which I already did. It's 81. All over 2a Negative b, that's negative 11, plus or minus the square root of 81 all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 2, which is 4. Let's simplify that. I know radical 81 is 9, so this is what I get. Negative 11 plus or minus 9 all over 4. And here's where your two answers come from, okay? You got to do plus 9, you got to do minus 9. Negative 11 plus 9 is negative 2, so negative 2 over 4, which simplifies down to negative 1/2. That's your first answer. The other one is negative 11 minus 9, which is negative 20 over 4, which is negative 5. Those are your two solutions. Now if I look at my options, I have negative 1/2 and negative 5. The only one that has those answers is B. My answer in this case is B. Okay, look at number 7. It says a rectangular field has dimensions 3x minus 4 yards and x minus 2 yards. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a rectangle, although you have one already there. 3x minus 4. Let's try that again. I'm going to draw a rectangle. The dimensions are 3x minus 4 and x minus 2. The area of the field is 16 square yards. So that tells me that I can pretty much figure out what x is by using the formula for the area. Now you got to recall that the area of a rectangle is length times width. So if it's length times width, it will be length, which is 3x minus 4, times width, which is x minus 2. Also, they gave me the information for A. A, in this case, this A right here is 16. The area is 16 square yards. So I'm going to plug in a 16 right there. And this is what I need to solve. You need to solve that. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to FOIL. Do not make this mistake, please. Don't split it up and say, oh, I know how to do this. It's 3x minus 4 equals 16, and then x minus 2 equals 16. That makes no sense. You can't do that, because you can do this only if it's 0, right? That's the zero product property, okay? So if 16 was a 0, you could do that. Not in this case, though. It's 16. So what I need to do is FOIL, multiply the two binomials. So that's what I'm going to do first. 3x times x right there is 3x squared. 3x times negative 2, that's the next one, is negative 6x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. Combine like terms and I get 3x squared minus 10x plus 8 and equals 16. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in standard form, and then once I do that I choose which method I'm going to use to solve. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 16 here, subtract 16, so I could get 0. 0 equals 3x squared minus 10x minus 8. And here's what you choose. Okay, you can try to factor, you can try the quadratic formula, you can even try to complete the square. I'm eliminating completing the square from one of my options because a is 3, doesn't really help me unless I multiply everything times 3, which you can do, of course, but I'd rather just go with something else than if it's not already set up for me. Okay, so let's see, can we factor this? Let's say 3 times 8 is 24, negative 24. Think of two numbers that when you multiply them, they make negative 24, and when you combine them together, they make negative 10. So first thing that comes to mind to me is 6 times 4, with one of them being negative. No, that doesn't work. Oh, 12 times 2, with the 12 negative. That's it. Negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. Negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10. That works. Okay, so 12 and negative 12 and positive 2. Let's use those. I'm going to erase it, but remember, negative 12 and positive 2. So here we go. 0 equals 3x squared minus 12x plus 2x minus 8. Factor by grouping. I'm going to group these together, and I'm going to group these together. Factor out a 3x from the first one, so 3x times x minus 4. Factor out a 2 from the second one, so 2x minus 4. The x minus 4 is one of the factors. The other factor is 3x plus 2. And don't forget that all of these are equal 0, right? I moved it to the right. I can do that or put it on the left still. Split them up and say x minus 4 equals 0 and 3x plus 2 equals 0. And then you solve and you get x equals 4. And you solve the other one, and I'm going to skip a couple steps and say that x equals negative 2 over 3. You guys know how to do that. Now what I do, before I make my choice of which one is correct, because I'm talking about the area, the length and the width of a rectangle, right? So at first glance, the negative one makes no sense. I just got to make sure I plug it in to see what I get, okay? Because when you plug it in into the length and the width, it might turn positive. We don't know. So here's what we have. The length is 3x minus 4. 3x minus 4. Plug in, let's say 4. Let's start with 4 because it's the easiest one right now. That's 12 minus 4, so that's 8. The length is 8, according to this x equals 4. Plug it into the other one. The width is x minus 2. Plug in 4, and you get 2. The width is 2. That seems right to me. Okay, the length is 8, the width is 2. Now, if you plug in negative 2/3, it's not going to work. Think about it. You plug in negative 2/3 right here, and you're going to get a negative. Plug it in right here, you're going to get a negative minus another number, so it's going to stay negative as well. That would make no sense. So that means that this one answer is not correct. So x equals 4, which means that the length is 8 and the width is 2. Now multiply those two times each other and you get 16, which is exactly what we're supposed to get according to the problem. Okay, so my answers here are going to be x equals, nope, let's erase that. The width equals 2 and the length equals 8, right? That's what we're looking for, the dimensions, which is the length and the width. Those are your final answers. Okay, now let's look at number 8. It says factor, that's it, just factor, so there's no solving, okay? There is no equal sign here, so don't write your answer x equals something. That wouldn't make sense here. You just have to split it up by factoring, okay? So first take out the GCF. These three have nothing in common, right? 5 and 37 and 24 have nothing in common. So let's go ahead and multiply A times C. 5 times 24 is 120, negative 120. So negative 120, oops, wrong color. Let's use black. Negative 120. And what are the factors of 120 that when you multiply them you get negative 37? Okay, so I'm going to try a bunch of different numbers to see which one gives me negative 37. How about 4 times, how many times is 4 going to 30 times? 4 times 30? No, there's no way that's going to give me 37. What about 5? 5 goes into 120 24 times. No, that still doesn't work. How about 3? 3 and 40. There you go. I want a negative, so I'm going to make the 40 negative. There you go. 3 and 40 make negative 120. 3 and negative 40. 3 minus 40 is negative 37. That's the one. Okay? That's the one. So that's our number that we need. Here's what I'm going to write. Ax squared, 5x squared, plus 3x. You know what? I'm going to do the negative first. Minus 40x, plus 3x, and minus 24. It doesn't really matter in which order you write them. Okay, remember that doesn't matter. I just like to put the negative first in this case because I want the second binomial, this one, to start with the positive. It just makes it easier to see. Okay, so once I factored here, I'm going to factor 5x from the first one and leaving me with x minus 8. I'm going to factor 3 from the second one, leaving me with x minus 8. And there you go. Your factors are 5x plus 3 and x minus 8. Those are your solutions right there. That is your factored form. Don't set it equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so don't write x equals 8 and x equals negative 3/5. It just says factor right here. It only says factor. It doesn't say solve. There is no equal sign. If you see an equal sign,
equals 0, for example, or equals whatever, then yeah, you go an extra step. But if it just is factored, just leave it there. Alright, now let's look at number 9. It says solve 2x squared plus 4x equals 4. If you notice, this one is kind of already set up for you so you can complete the square. The only thing missing is that the first coefficient is not a perfect square. So let's make it a perfect square. Okay. You have two options. Multiply everything by 2. That's option 1 right there. Multiply everything by 2. And that's going to give you 4x squared plus 8x equals 8. You can do that. Or your other option, and in this case it would work fine if you did it, is divide everything by 2, which will give you x squared plus 2x equals 2. This will work as well because you have a perfect square at the beginning, which is 1, and you have an even number as your b term. This is a perfect way to do it, and it's actually easier because the numbers are smaller. So let's go with that option. I divided everything by 2. Now, in order to figure out what completes a square here, half it, square it, divided by a, add it. So half of 2 is 1. Square it is still 1. Divided by a, which is 1. So it's still 1. Your magic number is 1. So here's what you have now. X squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 2 plus 1, which is 3. I added 1 to both sides. Now you factor the left side. It's a perfect square, we know that. So it's going to be x plus 1. It's quantity square, right? The square root of the first one, the square root of the last one. The middle term has a sign of b. Equals 3. Kill the square by taking the square root of both sides. And we have x plus 1 equals plus or minus radical 3. And finally, we subtract 1. Do not combine the radical 3 with the negative 1. Don't be a rookie. Okay, that's a rookie mistake. X equals negative 1 plus or minus radical 3. There's your final answer. There's nothing else to do there. Okay, now number 10 says solve negative 3x squared plus 3x equals negative 6. Once again, it looks like it's perfectly set up for you to complete the square, right, with the c on the other side. Although the first term is not a perfect square, we can make it a perfect square by dividing by 1 or by multiplying by 3. Either one will make it a perfect square. Now, if you do that though, look at what happens. Okay, let's say I multiply everything by negative 3 to make it a perfect square, which is 9. 9x squared minus 9x equals 18. If you try to half it, square it, divided by a, add it here, you're going to half 9 to get 9 halves. Square it, it's 81 over 4. Divided by 9, now you got a mess. Okay, so that's going to be a messy process. Let's avoid that right now. If I divide everything by 3, I get, well, negative 3 to make it positive. I get x squared minus x equals 2. If you half it, square it, divided by a, add it here, you're going to get a fraction again because this is 1x. Half it is 1/2, square it is 1/4, and so on. So you still get a fraction in this case. So if you'd rather not deal with fractions, and you could keep going in this one, it's just going to be a little bit messy. If you'd rather not deal with fractions, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to move the 6 over to the left side. Plus 3x plus 6 equals 0, right? Plus 6. I'm going to divide everything by 3 to make it a little simpler. Negative 3 to make it the first term positive. X squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. And I'm going to try to either factor or use the quadratic formula. Okay, let's see which one works. I'm going to try to factor. Let's see, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Two numbers that multiply to make negative 2, but when you combine them, they make negative 1. I can think of negative 2 and positive 1. There you go. Look, it's factorable. All right, we continue. Those are the two magic numbers right there. These. So, x squared minus 2x from these numbers over here, right? I'm looking at these numbers right here. Minus 2x plus 1x minus 2. And I do write 1x because it makes it easier to see what I'm supposed to factor. Factor by grouping, I group these two together, I group these two together. I get x and x minus 2. And on the other pair, I get 1 and x minus 2. And there you go. Almost ready to finish it. My two factors are x plus 1 and x minus 2 equals 0, right? This one does say solve, and there's an equal sign, so I have to go for another extra step. X plus 1 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. So my two solutions are x equals negative 1 and x equals 2. That one and that one. All right, now let's look at number 11. Short answer, it says the function h of t equals negative 16t squared plus h naught gives the height in feet of a ball dropped from a height of h naught after t seconds. It's missing a t right there. A ball is dropped from a height of 12 feet. After how many seconds does the ball hit the floor? Okay, now you got to be careful here where you plug in those numbers. Okay, 12 feet is the initial height of the ball. Don't plug it in here. Do not plug it in for h of t. Okay, that 12 feet is the initial height. That's this number right there. So plug it in right there. So since you dropped the ball from 12 feet, this is what you have. H of t equals negative 16t squared plus 12. Because you dropped the ball from 12 feet. Then the question is, after how many seconds does the ball hit the floor? That means 0 feet in height, right? Hit the floor, that means 0 feet. So that is the one, the 0 that you're going to plug in right there. 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 12. And now solve. This is not a very difficult problem to solve, guys. Don't try to use completing the square. Don't try to use quadratic formula. Don't try to use factoring. It's actually much easier than that. Okay, look at this quadratic. It's missing the b term. When it's missing the b term, when all you have is a and c, it is very easy to solve by just isolating the t squared. I'm just going to kick out the 12. Leaving me with negative 12 equals negative 16t squared. Divide by negative 16 to isolate the t squared. I'm going to continue over here. So t squared equals negative 12 over negative 16, which is going to be positive. 12 over 16 simplifies down to 3 over 4. Right? Divide the top by 3, divide the bottom by 4, divided by 4. Take the square root of both sides. And so t equals plus or minus radical 3 over 2, because radical 4 is 2. So that's what you're going to do. Take radical 3, positive, divided by 2. Take radical 3, make it negative, divided by 2. Now we can pretty much ignore the negative one because it's talking about time. So your answer is radical 3 over 2. Now to get an estimate of what that actually is, you're going to have to put that in a calculator because we're talking about time, so we need an estimate of it, okay? So let's punch that into a calculator and let's see. Radical 3 is about 1.73 divided by 2, and I get approximately 0.87 seconds. This ball is in the air for approximately 0.8 seconds. Okay, so now remember, when you're doing this, plug in the 12 into h naught. That's the initial height. Plug in the 0, which is when the ball hits the floor, into h of t. Solve by isolating the t squared. You can also use quadratic formula. Okay, you can just plug in 0 for b. You should get the same answer. Okay, but either way, that's what you should get. Okay, now let's look at number 12. Multiple response. That means choose as many as you think are correct. Given f of x equals x squared and g of x equals the quantity x plus 5 squared minus 5, choose all the statements that are true. So I'm looking at both of these functions and I'm choosing which ones of these are true. Okay. A, g of x, the second one, this is g of x right here, g of x, that's g of x, is f of x translated up 5 units and right 5 units. Now let's compare that to the actual function. G of x is x plus 5 quantity squared minus 5. The plus 5 inside the parentheses, that's a horizontal translation, so it's either left or right. Positive means left. Negative means right. So this is completely wrong because it says right 5 units, but it says plus. It should be to the left 5 units. Okay. Also, it says up 5 units. That doesn't make sense because it says minus 5 there. It should be plus 5 for up 5 units. Okay, so not A. A is incorrect. Let's cross it out. B. G of x is f of x translated down 5 units. There you go. That is correct because it says minus 5 right there at the end. Down 5 units and left 5 units. That's also correct. It's plus 5. That means to the left 5 units. So B is correct. Let's circle that one. Alright, let's look at C. G of x is wider than f of x. Now, how do we determine that? By the A term, remember? So, for example, the bigger the A term, let's say it's 3x squared, or 4x squared, or 7x squared. The bigger the A term, the more it stretches. But when we stretch it vertically. So 7x squared looks like that. 4x squared might look like that. And 3x squared might look like that, right? So when it says wider, it means this, which means that this number, the A term, should be smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. For something to be wider, the A term should be smaller. Now when I look at f of x and g of x, the A value is the exact same thing for both. It's 1 and 1, right? So for g of x to be wider makes no sense. That one is incorrect. Let's cross it out. And finally, D, g of x is the same shape as f of x. That one is true, right? We just said that since A is the same, they have the exact same shape. So yeah, maybe one is translated in a different place, but it has the exact same shape because the A value is the same. In this case, B and D are both correct. Okay, so here we go, number 13. Y equals negative x squared plus 5x plus 6. It's a multi-part problem, so we got to do each part. First, find the vertex. Now, it's in standard form, right? You see that? That's in standard form. If it was in vertex form, this one, this one, if it was in vertex form, we could easily find the vertex from the H and the K, right? It's not in vertex form, though it's in standard form. So in order to find the vertex when it's in standard form, you have to use this little formula, negative b over 2a. So in this case, b is 5, so negative 5, over 2 times a, which is negative 1, which means that down here we have negative 2, 5 over 2, because negative over negative, so 5 halves. You could leave it as 5 halves, or you could write it as 2.5. It doesn't matter. The vertex is 5 halves, comma, something. I gotta take that number and I have to plug it in. Okay, so I'm gonna plug in 5 halves into my equation, into my function, and y equals negative 5 halves squared plus 5 times 5 halves plus 6. 5 halves squared is 25 over 2, so negative 25 over 2. Notice that it's still negative. Be careful here. The square here is for the stuff inside the parentheses. The negative is not affected by the square because it's outside. So you square the stuff inside, which is 25 over 4, not 2, 25 over 4. You square the stuff inside the parentheses, and then the negative is still there. It doesn't go away. All right, let's keep going. 5 times 5 halves is basically 5 over 1 times 5 halves, so 25 over 2 plus 6. Negative 25 over 4 plus 25 over 2. What I need is common denominators, so 25 over 2 becomes, follow me along on this, 25 over 2 becomes 50 over 4 because I multiplied it by 2 over 2 in order to have common denominators. So negative 25 over 4 plus 50 over 4 is positive 25 over 4. So let me continue over here. Positive 25 over 4 plus 6. Okay? 6 is 6 over 1. In order to make it common denominators, I'm going to turn it into multiply by 4 over 4. So here's what I have. 25 over 4 plus 24 over 4, because I multiplied it by 4 over 4. So it's 49 over 4. There you go. So you could write it as a fraction or as a decimal. It's 2.5 comma 49 over 4, let's see, calculator time, which is 12.25. So as a fraction or as a decimal, doesn't much matter which one you use. Okay. Next step, find the axis of symmetry. We already did. Axis of symmetry always starts with x equals, and then just look at your vertex, your x value, 5/2. Or x equals 2.5, right? 2 5/10. Part C, state whether the function has a maximum or a minimum, find the value. Now look at this one. A is negative, right? The very first term is negative, which means that this parabola opens down. Think about what that means. Since it opens down, it does not have a minimum. It keeps going forever. But it does have a maximum. Right there is the maximum, right at the vertex. What is that maximum? We already found it. It's in the vertex. Okay, it is 12. First, we gotta say that it's a maximum, and the maximum is 49 over 4, or if you want to write it as a decimal, 12.25. Done. Okay, number 14, another multiple choice question. Which of these is the function f of x equals -3 times the quantity x plus 2 squared minus 4 in standard form? This is actually not a complicated problem. Just go ahead and FOIL it, expand it out, and put it in standard form. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. It's going to be f of x equals -3 times x plus 2 squared means times x plus 2, and then minus 4. So what I'm going to do here first is FOIL. So -3 times, let's FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 2 is 4. And then the minus 4 outside the parentheses. Be careful with that one. Now, inside the parentheses, I have -3, x squared. Combine like terms, you get plus 4x plus 4. Close the parentheses, and the minus 4 is still outside. Now we can finish by distributing the -3 and combining like terms at the end. So distribute the -3 right here, you get -3x squared. The next one you get -12x. The next one you get -12. And then there's a minus 4 at the end. Alright, and finally combine like terms. The only like terms I see is a -12, and finally I can put that -4 in there. So it's -3x squared minus 12x minus 16. Now look at my options. And A does not work, B does not work. Let's go over here. Looks like C works. There it is. My answer is C. And D, of course, does not work. C is the correct answer in this case. Okay, last problem in this review. It says solve this system. There's two functions here. One is a parabola, the other one is a straight line. Okay, so be careful with these. Graph them both, graph them separately. What you need to find is where do the two graphs intersect. Okay, so let's start with the parabola. Okay, the parabola is in vertex form. If you notice, it's already in this form. It's y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. So what you need to find is h, a, and k. Remember this? In this case, h is -1. So look at the function. It says x plus 1, which means that h is -1. Okay, a is 1, right? There's nothing there in front of the parentheses, and k is -1. Okay, write out the parent function of a quadratic, which we talked about before many times. -2, -1, 0, 1, 2 are your x values. 4, 1, 0, 1, 4 are your y values. And using that parent function, you're going to create a new table using your h, a, and k. Remember, h affects the x values, a and k affect the y values. Okay, so h says -1. That means to all the x values, all of these right here, I'm going to subtract 1. So what I'm going to get is -3, -2, -1, 0, and 1. I subtracted 1 to each of them. What that means is, what I'm really doing is moving the graph to the left 1 unit, right? -1, I'm moving it to the left 1 unit. That's why when I say that +1 over here means to the left, okay, where the h is actually -1. y. The y values are going to be multiplied by 1, which will make no difference, right? Multiply by 1 is not going to change them at all. And then after I multiply by 1, I subtract 1. So that's what I'm going to do. Do it in my head right here. 4 times 1 is 4, minus 1 is 3. Next, 1 times 1 is 1, minus 1 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0, minus 1 is negative 1. 1 times 1 is 1, minus 1 is 0. And 4 times 1 is 1, minus 1 is 3. There's your table of values. You plot those points and you got your parabola. Okay, negative 3, positive 3 is right there. Negative 2, 0 is right here. Negative 1 is right here. And 0, 0 is right here. And 1, 3 is right here. There's your parabola. Crosses through those points. Okay. Now let's graph the second part. Okay, I'm going to graph the other one in blue. Y equals x plus 2. That is really simple, guys. Remember, y equals mx plus b. I'm going to give you a refresher right now. B means begin. B is for begin. M is for move. B is the y-intercept. M is the slope. Okay. So in this case, M is 1. B is 2. So begin at positive 2. That means you put a point at positive 2 on the y-axis, right there. And the slope is 1, which means you go up 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1, and so on. Now you want to make it perfect, you go to the other way too. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. And so on. You connect those dots. And there's your graph. Now what you care about in this one is what are the 2 points where the graphs intersect. And there's 2 of them. Okay, so make sure you get them correctly. The first one over here on this side, if you look over here, they intersect exactly at negative 2, 0. The other one, you look up here and they intersect exactly at 1, 3. Those are your 2 solutions. The solutions in this case will be points, not just a particular number, but a point, 2 points actually. It's not always going to be 2 points, right? Because sometimes the line will only cross the parabola once if it hits it right at the vertex. And sometimes it will miss it completely. Like if my line is like down here, it just misses the parabola completely, so it's not going to cross it. So it could have 1 solution, 2 solutions, or none. Okay. These are the correct answers, and we're done.